It can be really hard to find good sources for Celtic myth. There are some great books, but there are also many good things online if you know how to find them. This video started out as a talk for my upcoming class, which is called Introduction to Celtic Mythology. I'll be showing them things like this every week. This is just the starting point. But it got kind of long, so I thought rather than take up so much of their class time, I'd make a video. And then I thought I might as well let more people get the benefit of it, so here we are. The things I'm going to show you aren't foolproof, and they won't work 100% of the time, but they are much better than just Googling it, and you may enjoy turning into a Celtic mythology detective. I believe that primary sources and scholarly research are the best places to start. If you want super easy answers, that's up to you, but then you can't expect them to also be super accurate. As far as primary sources go, if you're trying to look a deity up, I think it's best to read the myths they feature in. And if you want to read a myth, then you need an actual translation of that myth from Welsh or Irish into English. And yes, this only works if there are stories about the deity in the first place. The resources I'm going to use are MacKillop's Dictionary of Celtic Mythology, which is available to read on archive.org and also cheap to buy secondhand. If you want to see whether a book or something is on archive, just put archive after the name when you search. Here we are. Lately, I've heard a few complaints that there are some errors in MacKillop. That isn't surprising. There are around 4,000 entries. It's rare that a reference book is absolutely perfect, but the book is generally very trustworthy and well-researched. We're not writing a PhD thesis here, just looking stuff up. Another source we're going to use is Wikipedia. But wait, don't turn the video off in disgust. Wikipedia can be a useful starting place for research if you know how to use it. I'm not suggesting that we're just going to read the main entries and take them at face value. You might know the danger here. Anyone can edit a Wikipedia entry, whether they know what they're talking about or just think they do. I'll show you how I use Wikipedia as we go along. The final resource we're going to use is the Van Hamel Codex site. This can often be the secret word that opens the magic door to finding an actual translation of a Celtic myth or other text. It's not as well known as it should be. I decided to start with Beola. That's probably the anglicized pronunciation of this Irish name. The H makes the F silent. I've been curious about her and her story, so I'm going to find out. I'll start these searches using MacKillop's dictionary. You could start with Wikipedia, but this might work better. Here she is. Oh, her name means small dowry. Interesting. Every word marked with an asterisk here has its own entry. It says she's the wife of Dermot, king of Tara. You can flip to his entry and see what it says if you want to. Her story is told in the wooing of Beola. Great. This is really what I'm looking for. The title of her story. The entry then goes on to summarize the story. It mentions that it was translated by Standish O'Grady in the 1890s. That could be useful. I know his stuff is on archive. It also mentions Miles Dillon wrote something in 1945. I can't tell whether this is another translation or just a scholarly paper about the story. I might prefer a translation by Miles Dillon, if that's what it is. I could write this stuff down or copy and paste it somewhere, but the main thing I wanted was the name of her story. I don't think I'll even need Wikipedia for this one. I'm going to go straight to the Van Hamel Codex site. Remember what I said about Van Hamel being the secret password? I'm putting it at the end of my search. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. It's going to list the manuscripts that this was first written down in. I don't really need that, so I'll scroll down to primary sources. Great. It looks like this has been translated a few times, and you can see that some of them are available online. It's typical that the older ones are online, because the copyright has expired. Sometimes these old translations are great, and sometimes they're all you can find, so you make do with them. However, more recent translations have the benefit of modern scholarship, and the English they use is also less old-fashioned. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to copy this whole citation back into my search engine in case it is actually online. Ah, great, it's on JSTOR. I have a free JSTOR account. Anyone can get one, and you can access a lot of good stuff that way, but some things are still behind a paywall. Fingers crossed. Okay, this journal, Modern Philology, is on here. I need to scroll down to find the article. There it is. And yes, I can read it for free. Excellent. I would have to pay silly money to download it, but that's okay. It's only 7 pages. I'll read it online. This translation is from the 1940s, but there was another one on Codex from the 1980s. It was also in a journal. I went back and copied and pasted that one into my search, and it's also on JSTOR. I think I might start by reading this one since it's the most recent. If I decide that I want to make a serious study of this story, then it will be handy to have several translations to compare. Some of you will be used to doing this kind of research, maybe for your work or a university degree. For other people, this might feel like a lot of trouble to go to, but it quickly becomes routine if you want to find good translations of Celtic stories. Let's do one more search. People often ask me about Aroun. Okay, I've leafed through MacKillop, and here's the entry. I'm going to split this entry to make it easier for you to see on your screen. Looking at the entry honestly, there are things here that I understand which you might not as a beginner. I'll explain them since we're here, but don't be discouraged. Celtic myth is a big area of study. I don't know it all either. So he starts by describing Aroun's best-known myth, which is found in the first branch of the Mabinogi. That information is right at the bottom of the entry, but if you're super new to Celtic mythology, you could easily miss it. This is where the story is told of how Puig and Aroun change places that he talks about in the first paragraph. Then he says that Aroun owned a magic cauldron, which is mentioned in the Spoils of Annuvin. This is a famous poem, and I know you might not know that. Now, that bothered me a bit, so I looked the poem up in a book to check. It's in a text called the Book of Taliesin, so I figured out what he means because the poem says that the cauldron belongs to the head of Annuvin. MacKillop's assuming that that can only be Aroun, I think. He goes on to say that the cauldron is one of the treasures of Britain. He's referring here to a text called the 13 Treasures of Britain. I checked that one in a different book, and again, it's the same cauldron as in the poem, but Aroun isn't actually mentioned there either. If you're new to this, you might not know that. MacKillop isn't really wrong here, but I think he's making an assumption about Aroun being synonymous with the head of Annuvin in all cases. I'm kind of nitpicking, though. Now he goes on to reference a story about Aroun giving pigs to Pryderi, but he doesn't bother to say where the story is. Then he talks about Aroun and Amaethon in the Battle of the Trees. The Battle of the Trees is the name of another poem in the Book of Taliesin, but I know that there's no reference to Aroun or the head of Annuvin in that poem, so I was puzzled. Unfortunately, not everyone will know that, or have a copy of the Book of Taliesin. I'll show you in a minute how I solved that puzzle, but I was only able to know that he isn't mentioned because I do have a copy of the Book of Taliesin. The entry goes on to say that in recent Welsh legend, Aroun is displaced, as MacKillop puts it, by Gwyn ap Nudd. That's a bit of an interpretation, but certainly not wrong. He finishes up by saying that Aroun might be a parallel for the Irish Tara, or an inspiration for a character in some Arthurian literature. Based on this entry, what myths might have information about Aroun? You definitely need to check out the first branch of the Mabinogi. Where is the story of Pryderi and his pigs, though? Let's see if the entry for Pryderi is any help. Oh wow, that entry is short, and it doesn't mention Aroun. So, based on this entry, you could read the first branch of the Mabinogi, and there are things about Pryderi and pigs, plus something about the Battle of the Trees that isn't clear yet. I did check MacKillop's entry for the Battle of the Trees, but it doesn't clear up the mystery. This thing with the Battle of the Trees, or Catgoddai in Welsh, was really bugging me. A quick glance at some books I had confirmed that MacKillop wasn't mistaken, but my books didn't clear up the mystery either. So I looked on Wikipedia. We're going there next anyway, so let me show you what I found. It starts by talking about the poem. I didn't read it all because I already know that the reference MacKillop is talking about isn't in the poem. One thing I'm noticing about this entry is that there are no footnote numbers. That's really not a good sign. Those can be really important, but I kept reading. Interpretations. Contemporary allusions to the Battle of the Trees elsewhere in medieval Welsh. That sounds a bit promising. It mentions the triads. We'll cover those later in the course, but trust me, this isn't quite what we're looking for. Aha! According to a summary of a similar story preserved in Pennyarth Manuscript 98b, the fight broke out after the divine ploughman Amaethon, etc., etc. Gwydion ultimately triumphed by guessing the name of one of Arawn's men. Oh, I do remember this text now, just vaguely. Where have I seen it? Still no footnotes to tell me where the author got this. So I scrolled down to the references and external links. This is often where the real gold is on Wikipedia. A link that will send you to something a bit more grown up. Here we go. Excerpt from Pennyarth 98b in Welsh. Oh, that might be a little too grown up. My Welsh isn't very good, but I'll click it anyway. I recognize this as part of the old Mary Jones website. This used to be one of the only decent websites for Celtic mythology, and it's not really maintained anymore. It's gotten kind of old and clunky, but still full of good stuff. Look, translation here, hooray. Here it is, translated by Lady Charlotte Guest. So it's quite an old translation and possibly not a very good one. These are the englans that were sung at Cadgothai, or as others call it, the Battle of Achren, which was on account of a white roebuck and a whelp, and they came from hell. I'm guessing that the Welsh says they came from Anuven, which isn't hell. Yep. Like I said, not a great translation, and therefore Amaethon and Don and Arawn, king of Anuven, fought, and there was a man in that battle, and so on. So that was worth it. We found a nice little story involving Arawn. The actual poem, The Battle of the Trees, is quite a big deal in Welsh literature, but it doesn't include this information about Amaethon and Arawn. Deep breath. Where were we? Oh, yes. Looking up Arawn on Wikipedia. Remember, we're mainly here to find actual mythology about him, not to read the entry for information that may not all be correct. Here we go, the 4 branches. So this confirms MacKillop, that there's a story in the first branch, and here it's sending us to the 4th branch. So we found the Battle of the Trees thing, and the 1st and 4th branches are on our to-do list. Can we find the 1st and 4th branches with Van Hamel? You might be looking at the subject bit over here, that it doesn't work yet. Hopefully one day it will. Let's scroll down to primary sources. It's listing all the different published Welsh editions, plus the translations of the Mabinogi year. Now I see that one is missing, and I'm not sure why it's missing. That's a bit disappointing, because I know that one is online. So the only links are to the Welsh editions, but I think some of these translations are on archive. It's more likely to be the older ones. I thought Gant's might be. I did look, but it's not there. But Jones & Jones is, and it's a perfectly good translation, even if the English is a bit old-fashioned. So here it is, and here's the table of contents listing the 4 branches. So I guess we'd better add archive.org to our list of important websites. Now, here's one last tip. There is a very good translation of the 4 branches online. I'm not sure why it's not on Codex. Maybe because it's self-published, which means it isn't peer-reviewed. That might be a requirement for being listed on Codex. Anyway, this is it. Mabinogi.net. Hang on, what's all this? This isn't the website I searched for. This is an increasing problem that online games, named after Celtic stories, impinge on your internet searches. I usually go in via a bookmark. So my advice, type mabinogi.net /translations and then bookmark it. I've double-checked, and adding translations did make it work. It was right at the top. Anyway, pick your branch. Not only does this give you the text, it has lots and lots of footnotes to help you understand things. And those footnotes are all hyperlinked, so you can click them, read them, and click right back to the text really easily. I think we learned a few things from that last search. First, it's easier to find things when you already know a little bit about what you're looking for, and you do have some books and some idea of what's in them. But persistence also pays off. If you look in one place and you get a lead, carry that to the next website. And if you still can't find what you're looking for, don't be afraid to ask someone. I hope this has been helpful. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the basic links to the sites we visited in the description. If you're watching as a student, they will be in your PDF files. If you enjoyed this video, why not sign up for my upcoming class, Introduction to Celtic Mythology? It will be packed full of research tips like the ones in this video. And it will also provide you with the knowledge and context you need to study Celtic mythology with confidence. You can also follow me or support me on Patreon, or find information on upcoming classes and events on my website.